Well, my name is Sarah Giles. I work for the Queensland Government. I work in the Science Department, and I'm a delegate of the Together Union, which is the public service union in Queensland, so the sort of equivalent of the CPSU up there. The Queensland Government has cut 14,000 positions. That includes 3,000 temporary workers and then 11,000 other positions. So the majority of those positions were filled. They had people working in them. So, but it's hard to find the numbers of exactly how many people have lost their jobs so far. But certainly, 14,000 positions. The 3,000 temporary workers who were cut, they were on contracts, so they didn't have their contracts renewed, and this was something that the Newman Government said, oh well, these people should have known that their contracts could be could stop at any time. But really, these people had been working on contracts, a lot of them for year after year after year, with the promise and hope of permanency. The other 11,000 positions were permanent positions, and those people were, it's not a voluntary process. Some people did volunteer, some people who were near retirement age, and they were thinking about leaving soon anyway. So some people did volunteer, but in a lot of places volunteers weren't asked for. A lot of places the redundancies were forced. Now, there's a bit of a trick in there, because the government is actually calling the sacking process, when someone comes to tell you you now don't have a job here, they're calling that a voluntary redundancy. So there's a terminology trick that they're using that means that in all of their media statements, they can actually say that people have accepted voluntary redundancies, when in fact they're not voluntary. The government has said that the 14,000 is the cap, but previously, for instance, in the election campaign, they didn't say a single thing about this. So you wouldn't trust them now that they say that there are going to be 14,000. You wouldn't trust that that's actually going to happen. For instance, in my department, one thing that is happening is there have been a number of redundancies handed out from one section of our funding, but then there's still questions over another section of our funding. So I think it could well be ongoing, but it's so hard to tell at the moment. It was a big surprise attack. The Newman Government didn't say a single thing about this while they were campaigning. They said all throughout their campaign that they want to protect frontline services. They said that they wanted to give public servants a secure working environment. Campbell Newman, the Premier, actually went on tape saying all of these things, lie after lie after lie, before the election. And so the cuts have taken a lot of people by surprise. And you see in the comments that a lot of people make in the on the newspaper websites, on the Courier Mail website and things like that, a lot of people on there are saying, I voted for you, Campbell Newman, you never said anything about this, now I've been sacked. So there are a lot of people who had no idea. There have been a whole lot of programs that have been shut down as part of the budget cuts. So a lot of people sacked who provide services and directly to the community. That those services have been cut. The reason that was given for the cutting was because those services can be provided by the private sector, and that's gone out in the media statements and everything like that. There are some significant sections For instance, road tech, which is like a sort of construction arm of Transport and Main Roads, that 600 workers were sacked from there, and you would have to assume that these sort of cuts are just for cutting work that needs to be done. This is a direct handout to private sector companies who will then make money, make profit off the winning these contracts that for work that will need to be done, that was currently done by workers who have now been sacked. Well, when you have a government that has a lot of close ties with big business, like the Liberal Party does, then you couldn't discount that as a factor. I have no proof of that myself, but certainly that sort of thing goes on in government, and this type of government, with strong ties with industry, you would expect that that there's a bit of pressure in there, but at the same time, the government seems very willing themselves to carry out these attacks.
Etc.
Well, I'll answer the thing about morale first. It's been really difficult. There have been the stress levels have just gone through the roof. The uncertainty that the cuts were coming, and you didn't know who was going to be cut. It was a totally arbitrary process, and so that created a lot of fear, a lot of uncertainty, and morale just went through the floor, really, and especially when you think that these are the people, this is the government that you're supposed to be working for. You're supposed to be carrying out their the way that they think that governance should be done, but at the same time, you read in the media every day the sort of lies that and slander, really, that the government is saying about public servants, that we're all lazy, that we don't know how to work properly, that if we're good workers, we should be able to find a job in the private sector, all these sort of things, and so that really destroys morale. The sackings were really tough. Like, to highlight the most extreme cases, there are 3 suicides that I know of that have happened, from people who have lost their jobs. So it's a really serious situation that's massively affected people's lives. People can't feed their kids. They can't. A lot of people can't get another job. There are a lot of people who have been, clearly looking for jobs ever since they've been found out that they've been made redundant. But the job market isn't that good at the moment, partly because of the cuts that the government's made has meant that the private sector is a lot of uncertainty. People aren't hiring, and so a lot of people have been finding it really difficult. The service delivery has this is a big thing, because the 14,000 positions that I spoke of, these are just in for jobs that are directly government jobs, so people who are employed by the government. On top of that 14,000, there are many other workers who have been sacked. I don't know the numbers, they're extremely hard to find out. Of workers who have been sacked from organisations that, community organisations that the government provides funding for. For instance, the Queensland Health Department funds many different specialist organisations who then run a range of health programs that are really necessary in the community, and those programs have been cut. So the funding from Queensland Health has been cut, and therefore those programs have been cut. And this is, these are, really, serious, serious things that some things have an impact straight away, but then a lot of these sort of things, for instance, cutting to preventative health, which there's been a lot of, cutting to employment services, for instance, like cutting the contracts for organisations that provide employment services for Aboriginal people, or employment services for like kids getting out of prison, and things like that. They're things that will keep building up and keep having more of an impact on people's lives. There's been there have been a number of opinion polls that have come out showing that all of these cuts have significantly decreased the popularity of the Newman government. Now, to put it in perspective, the Newman government won an election in March, the biggest landslide election that has ever happened in Queensland. The Labor Party, which was previously, which was the previous government, has been reduced to 7 seats out of I think it's an 89 seat, 79 seat parliament. So there is no opposition to the Liberals and to the Liberal National Party in the parliament now, effectively. But there was polling done that showed that if at one stage during this campaign of cuts, that if an election was held then, that Campbell Newman would lose his seat. I wish there was an election then. But yeah, the community perception of the government, I think, has changed a lot, mainly because the biggest thing that they've done, and really the only thing that they've done, it was something that they didn't campaign about at all, and it has massively affected a lot of people's lives. So that's sort of in terms of public opinion, but the campaign has been much more than just a public opinion campaign. There have been mass protests on the streets. We've had the biggest union rally since the Work Choices campaign, which was where we had 2 demonstrations, big demonstrations, one of 5,000 workers and one of 10,000 workers who marched on Parliament. Fantastic events with so many workers from varied industries, like where you can see workers who science workers who work in labs, like from my work, alongside building and construction workers, electricians, teachers, so many people coming out to these demonstrations to send a message to the government that you do not have a mandate for this. Well, I've been working for the Queensland Government for 9 years now, and in that whole time we've had a Labor Party government, and the relationship between the union and the government hasn't always been great, but it's also always been significantly better than this. And so I think that means that the union, both in terms of the leadership of the union, but also the rank and file delegates of the union, were, as well as the broader Queensland public in general, was really quite unprepared for the type of assault that we've received from the new government. In my whole the whole time that I've been working for Queensland Government, we've had some protests about our about an EBA and about work choices and that sort of thing, but we've never had a strike or anything like that. And so that's not really something that a lot of public servants in Queensland are used to or familiar with, and I think that makes it harder when there's not that history and tradition of fighting back and struggling against the government, and things like that, makes it harder to run the kind of serious campaign that we need to have now. Well, I haven't been on a strike so far, and unfortunately I haven't been on one yet as well with this campaign. And I think that's the one place where we could have really made headway if we'd with the campaign, if we'd been able to have some serious and concerted industrial action across the public sector. We could have really hit the government where it hurt. Unfortunately, the government had brought in a whole range of anti-union laws, making it quite difficult to strike and things like that, which meant that and a lot of people, even though they wanted to take the industrial action, if it had been given the okay sort of thing, weren't prepared to risk the fines, $2,700 fines that the Newman government had brought in specifically for the reason of stopping strikes in the public sector while they were cutting all these jobs and restructuring all these departments. Like, that's what they said in the press release when they brought in those fines. That was the purpose of them, and unfortunately it seems to have worked. Now, I think that there could have still been a possibility to challenge those, but the leadership of the union chose not to do that. Chose not to do that industrially through actually defying the laws, and calling for strike action to happen regardless of the fines, and regardless of those laws, and regardless of what the government was saying, regardless of the state of their relationship with the government. Well, the cross delegates meeting was an initiative of the Queensland Council of Unions, which is sort of the equivalent of the Victorian Trades Hall Council, and so that was a meeting of delegates that was attended by about representatives and delegates of 32 different unions, and in a meeting that held 300 people, 300 delegates in the meeting, and also link-ups right across the state with many other workers in regional centres. And so the purpose of that meeting was to get endorsement for a day of action on September 12th, which was the day after the state budget was released. And some of us there thought that we needed to do a bit more than have just a protest. Although, I mean, it turned out the protest was fantastic, but there was we still thought that there needed to be more than that, and that if we kept just playing by the laws that had been set up, playing by the rules that the Newman government had put in place, that there's no way that we could win. And so myself and a delegate from the teachers union moved a motion to endorse strike action where possible to coincide with the September 12th day of action. And that was received a lot of support in the meeting, and there were quite a number of people who came up to us afterwards and said, yes, that's exactly what we need to do. There was actually a guy from an organiser with the electricians union there, the ETU, who came up to me afterwards and said that when you moved that motion, that my phone filled up with text messages from our delegates in Cairns, in Townsville, in Mackay, saying vote for that motion. So there was a bit, there was the sentiment there for it. The problem was that even though you can get a motion you can move a motion at these sort of meetings and get it voted up, when the sentiment exists for it, that it's a very different thing to actually implement that on the ground. To carry out a strike on the ground, you need a really strong network of rank and file delegates who are committed to really taking the fight up, and because those kind of delegates networks are essential for putting pressure on the leadership of the unions, putting pressure on the Queensland Council of Union, or here the Victorian Trades Hall Council, those kind of organisations, to actually carry out what has been voted for. The issue of unprotected industrial action has largely been avoided. To say even to say that it had been discussed, even that falls short of the mark. There was never the idea, the talk coming from the union office saying that we would take unprotected industrial action. The thing that meant that we could that there was a possibility of taking protected industrial action was that there was a coincidence between, time-wise, between the cuts and also the negotiations for the biggest section, for the enterprise bargaining agreement for the biggest section of Queensland Government workers, which meant that there was a window of opportunity to take protected industrial action that has now been stymied because we've been referred to arbitration. But it's really that, and I think that shows one of the big weaknesses of the unions at the moment, that complete unwillingness to call for unprotected industrial action. And to even lobby the members or canvass the members for what people would think about something like that, and to just accept people won't want to do it, because you see that the places where and the industries where the workers are prepared to take the unprotected industrial action, that they're the industries that are going forwards, where the unions are going forward and workers' rights are going forwards. For instance, we had a really amazing struggle go on at one of the building sites in Queensland, the Children's Hospital building site, where the workers have just won a dispute after 9 weeks on strike, which is a long time to be going without pay. 9 weeks on strike, but they have won every one of the conditions that they were asking for. Now, you contrast that to my workplace, to Queensland Government, where we've just had 14,000 workers sacked in the biggest assault on government workers ever in Queensland, and we have had no unprotected industrial action, or no industrial action just at all. And it's left us totally open to that sort of attack, despite how widespread the opposition to the government is, despite how well attended all the public demonstrations were and things like that. The strikes are really the one place where you can hit people like this where it hurts. Well, we don't have a rank and file delegate group like you guys have. We have a few other things, like our delegate, the model that our union operates on includes the rank and file delegates quite closely with the sort of official running of the union, and then the delegates who are elected to be part of the state council, they then in places organise local level activist groups, in the areas where they work. For instance, at my, in my building, we have a union activist group that meets and organises things for what's going to happen in our for the few thousand workers that are in our building, and that sort of thing is replicated across the state, really. So but I'm definitely going to take back the some of the initiatives that you guys have here about your rank and file network, because it's exciting stuff.